The number plate holder again. It's cracked completely through here. Cable ties and safety wire.
That small issue worked around, we left well 36. Some more scrap metal here, the remains of a motorbike.
So that is the Ural native soak.
In this section we were starting to see a lot more tree life. This was especially prominent when we reached well 37, Lapuru. This well was sunk close to a native soak and apparently used to produce excellent water, but it lays in ruins today. It features the graves of Shoesmith, Thompson and Chinaman, drovers bringing 150 bullocks down the CSR in 1911. Chinaman, despite the name, was Aboriginal. They had been murdered and their bodies were found at the well by Tom Cole. Subsequently, Sergeant R.H. Pilmer led a punitive expedition declaring that that route shall be entirely cleared of all obstacles likely to be a menace to those using that route. It is said that as a result, there are at least 2 more men, a woman and 2 children buried nearby. Wally Dowling, one of the CSR's most prolific drovers, liked to claim that this well was haunted. Horses shied away from it, and Aborigines avoided it. Tourists often repeat this like it's a serious claim, calling it the haunted well, but it was just one of his many tall tales about the area. Continuing on from there, we ascended a dune, as we had many times before. But this time, we ran just a little too far to the left and found a patch of especially soft sand. We drove forwards and back, trying to get enough momentum to get over the small sandy crest, but to no avail. Would the max tracks need to come out? Were we actually stuck? A little bit of shoveling and some tyre pressure reduction later, we had another go at extricating the vehicle.
There we go. Yep, sorry about that.
Filling in the worst of the ruts on the track, we continued on. We were a little disappointed that we hadn't managed a perfect run of the canning, but we were pleased that it had taken this long for it to happen. Reaching Reeve Rock, otherwise known just as the Rock Art Cave on some maps, we had a look inside. There was a little to see in there, and after looking around, we headed on. We reached the site of well 38, Wodjapani, parking well away from the actual site of the well. This well is quite different to the others, having been blasted into a creek bed with dynamite. In the overhang of the cave you can see a bunch of grooves where spears have been sharpened against the rock. We continued on down the track, the dense vegetation becoming sparse again. One of the dunes here has a trig marker at the top. There's an interesting rock formation in this section which just looks like the hillside has crumbled away. At well 39, Kukapanyu, there's a lot of scrap metal and a tiny amount of water, but there's also some barrels of jet fuel here.
That has fuel in it.
I was wondering what these could have been used for until we found this in someone else's canning trip video. Apparently there's been some activity involving helicopter-flown metal detectors looking for materials in the ground. Canning marked out a large pastoral block around this well, but it was never developed. But after this point, it became very overgrown again. Here we crossed Tobin Lake. And even the lake has a dune to cross.
Was there any water in the lake, over?
Not really. We did break through the crust in a couple of spots and throw some mud up. And there's a little puddle in front of us, but no, there's no water.
Well 40, Ngatawalu, was covered and contained a little water, but there was a soak at ground level. There was also most of a Mitsubishi Triton that had suffered a fairly catastrophic chassis failure. It appeared to have been stripped for parts.
Still driving?
This well also contains the grave of Michael Tobin. An altercation developed with an Aborigine named Munkututu occurred after Tobin allegedly detained his wife. But others say the altercation occurred as revenge for the theft of sacred objects by Canning's party. Munkututu speared Tobin and was then shot by him, resulting in the death of both men. Tobin was buried in this grave. Munkututu was buried in an unmarked grave somewhere in the vicinity of which the location was not recorded. Continuing on, the track was fairly flat, albeit corrugated. Well 41, Tiru, has been restored by TrackCare WA and contained water, although not of a colour that invited any use of it.
This then is Rob Stokes. He was born about 15 miles from where the Range Rover was built.
At first, a few normal drone shots were taken. And then we got to the bottom of the menu with the interesting options. Turns out it can do automated dolly zooms. I wonder what Hitchcock would think of that.
Okay, we're on the Canningstock route, pretty far away, and I know a lot of you are going to ask this question. It's the toilet question. How to go to the toilet when you're on the Canningstock route. First thing you need to do, grab your wallet, grab a 50 out, donate that to TrackCare WA, grab your toilet paper, and then head up to the toilets that TrackCare WA have built for us. So much easier than digging a cat hole.
In the morning, we headed out with some ambitious plans as usual. The turn-off to Gunnawarba Native Well leaves the track from here, but looking at the track it looked a lot less present than even the track to the Deeble Hills. We decided to give this one a miss as we were going to try to get to Helena Spring. No wonder that trailer failed, the lid alone was too heavy to even pick up off the ground. Finding the turnoff to Helena Spring, we headed down it, but it wasn't long before the track became inconsistent and vague. From what I've read, it was barely there in years gone by, but it was even worse now. The spin effects and dead trees were one thing, but what they concealed were some boulder-sized anthills. Hit one of them and we might not be driving out of here. We abandoned the attempt after we got 2.5 kilometers in, heading back to the main track. Progress was below 10 kilometers per hour, and at this rate it'd take us 8 hours to get there, with no guarantee it wouldn't get worse on the way. Few people have ever been here, and we were not to join them. We carefully cleared out all of the accumulated spin effects under the car. Well 42, Gulei, is otherwise known as Gully Tank after the tank present here. I was imagining more a rainwater tank, but I guess this is the kind they would have had out here. The original well is supposedly in a sandstone depression and has water filtering through from the lake, but it's not known where it is today.
So that's the old CSR on the left, and that's the new one on the right.
Hear the hollow sound?
Yeah.
But then when I'm not sitting down, it still does it.
Oh.
I reckon it's probably just all the mud.
The sunspot cycle had been unusually good, and at this point HF conditions meant we had the 15 metre band open during the peak of the day, but seemingly only to New Zealand. Well 43, Katajakara, stands as a shallow ditch for a hole and some scrap metal. But the section between wells 43 and 44 consists of something interesting. The CSR has been realigned in this section along some seismic lines, tracks cleared in a straight line for mineral exploration.
I am indeed missing some max track straps.
Alright, we'll catch you up there with them.
Looking at the flagged hole, it appears that it actually managed to flex all the way over and smash into the tyre at one point. So, these things are cursed.
Well 44, Jim Piranyakara,
Has covers but no hole, which is the reverse of a lot of them. We've got some sort of piece of pole, we've got stock trough funnel, half a 44-gallon drum, and some stock trough.
Supposedly at 21 degrees south, there's a can. But if that's it, I'm a little disappointed.
That's all the rocks they could find in this area.
A few more dunes, and sections of the track were now really overgrown. But then, Rusty's dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree.
Now it's happy?
Yeah.
It's all good.
No warnings. All the warnings are gone.
It's a computer at heart, so turning it off and on again seemed to work. But would the issue reoccur? We reached the Gravity Lakes clay pan, where we would camp for the night. We had the idea that we'd try cooking on a wood fire for a change, but to get some decent coals from what was basically a bunch of sticks, we'd have to pile up a lot of them. While we were cooking relatively normal meals on a gas stove, Rusty's setup was somewhat different. It featured a microwave oven driven by an inverter to cook pre-frozen meals.
Still thinks it turns on,
Yeah.
and then immediately kicks the fans in.
Yeah, that casing probably shouldn't be poking out there.
The only problem here was that the inverter had died. Offering our gas stove as a substitute should he want to stoop to it.
Should you want to stoop that low?
Have you seen the brand name? Let's not worry about stooping.
But it turned out that he just had a spare inverter though. And a few hours later we finally had our coals. That's all for this time. For more adventures, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and see you next time.